tonight. We begin with Secretary of State Kerry, who seems at least publicly to be optimistic that an Iranian nuclear deal can be reached and that Congress will approve it. Kerry in Germany for a meeting of the group of 7 foreign ministers. Here he is.
We are confident about our ability for the president to negotiate an agreement and to do so with the ability to make the world safer.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani dismissive of any threat of congressional disapproval of such a deal. Rouhani said Tehran is not negotiating with the lawmakers, but rather with world powers. Joining me now, Congressman Randy Forbes, a member of the Judiciary Committee. He also serves on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us. A day after you all got a deal on congressional oversight of any nuclear deal with Iran, the Iranians seem to be dismissing your role altogether. Your response?
Well, Lou, I have a feeling the Iranians are going to dismiss any kind of deal that comes out and probably not comply with it anyway. But I think what you're seeing here in Washington is a bipartisan rejection of what the president's doing, because we know that this is a very dangerous deal for the United States and the safety of the world. One of the things that you can look at, Lou, is that, the president's talking about lifting these sanctions, and if it doesn't work, he'll change his mind. But already seeing the Russians now moving, because of this, to sell their S-300 air defense systems to the Iranians. Once these get deployed in there, it would make it incredibly difficult to do any kind of military strikes in Iran, and almost impossible for the Israelis to do that.
Impossible for the Israelis, but there is a larger reality here for the United States, and that is that this president in particular, but many leaders in both parties on Capitol Hill have said sanctions against Russia are working and grinding Putin to his knees. Sanctions against Iran are working, grinding the Ayatollah to his knees. The reality is we have seen aggression, greater aggression from Russia. We've seen greater expansion by Iran as it seeks to absolutely institutionalize hegemonic domination over the region. When have we ever been more inept in our judgment geopolitically?
Well, Lou, I think it's not because we've had the sanctions on. I think it's because our foreign policy relating to Russia and Iran has been wrong in other areas. But I think certainly the sanctions that you have on Russia are taking a toll, and the sanctions on Iran are taking a toll. And to lift those sanctions is going to put an acceleration of what the Iranians do. So I think it's not just the sanctions alone, but I think it's the fact this administration has basically been absent across the world in terms of its leadership, and that's what's emboldened the Russians to take many of the actions they've taken on a global basis.
And now, Congressman, as you well know, Russia and Iran are aligned. Their interests are aligned because both are dependent upon the price of crude oil. They appear to be getting closer together, allying as well as being aligned in economic interest. And that has to make, I would think, leaders such as yourself, as well as the president himself, nervous about having that strong combination of Iran and Russia economically aligned and having perhaps significant influence over the price of world crude oil.
Well, Lou, it's not just that. It's also the relationship between the Russians and the Chinese now. We've found out data now that the Japanese have had to scramble their planes at a higher number because of Russian and Chinese planes going into their airspace than they have since the Cold War. We see exactly what you mentioned with the Russians and the Iranians. And part of the reason is this White House is just having a collapse in their foreign policy in almost every place you look, whether it's the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Middle East, you name it. They've had a failed policy at this particular point in time. That's got everybody in Washington very concerned.
Turning to domestic policy, the Department of Justice filing papers with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals trying to move past Judge Andrew Hannon's injunction against the Obama administration on illegal immigration and the president's fiat. The Justice Department response to the circuit court has been to say that the president didn't say what he plainly, baldly said which is he changed policy, immigration policy, enforcement policy, and that there would be repercussions on any individual officer or agent in immigration enforcement if they don't follow his policies. And they said that the judge misconstrued that. I mean, this is a new level of chutzpah.
Lou, can you imagine your employer sending you a memo that says if you don't comply with his policies that there are going to be consequences, and you would interpret that to mean he really doesn't mean that, and especially of the United States? And this is an administration that constantly does one thing, and then they'll tell the courts, oh no, that's not what we really meant. Look at what they did with the health care bill when they first of all said it wasn't a tax, and then came back and said, oh, now it should be justified because it is a tax. What they're doing with immigration is just a travesty, and what they're putting these agents through is just unfair.
Congressman, we always appreciate you being here. Good to have you with us. Congressman Randy Forbes.